I'm going to tell about Thomas Brown because what he really focuses on stresses is that this is not a behavior that you can blame at first. It is not the behavior that's bad. It is all these characteristics and symptoms that we have described now. They are related to our brain management system, he's calling. We are going to speak more about that. And it's not about how smart you are. This is something else. And Brown has his way of describing how it can be top intellectual functioning, and it can be all levels. That's something else, and that's important to distinguish between. There is a wide range of characteristics of people with ADHD, but that they have in common, more or less, that they have trouble in staying in tune, to be aware in situation. Those are the people who easily can drift off to like a bad connection, actually, as we sometimes can experience. And some of you maybe have experienced in this meeting already and in other Zoom meetings. But in the ADHD cases, this happens in the brain. It's not easy to stay focused. Brown, he really stresses and points out that this is not about willpower. I don't know how it is in your country. In Norway, sometimes you can hear teachers or assistants or other working with the kids say, it's nothing really bad, but it's just something some I'm just reminded by Morten to keep my hands out of the way for the microphone so that I don't disturb the sound. Thank you, Morten. That's good, necessary. So what Brown also stresses, it is not like a pregnancy. Either you are pregnant or you are not. It's not like that with ADHD. It's more like it's more like a depression. A depression, everybody's depressed sometimes. Things occurred in our lives and we are sad for a period maybe. But some people have bigger problems and it becomes a situation in which they need treatment, medical or therapeutic. And this is more like the ADHD. So I would recommend you to listen to Brown. He also speaks about how you can be very sensitive to be a part of it, so that when people make a lot of sounds when chewing, for example, you can go mad for a little while, and then suddenly you don't pay attention to it. It isn't a problem. So what is also important is that all of this, all these behavior characteristics that should be listed, they exist all of it. And it's so I've spoken to adult people, well functioning in most areas actually, but with severe problems in getting their job done, and in several other things. And when they tell about how but what I need to realize is that exactly this is the case. Most of it is recognizable. The problem is for the person with an ADHD diagnosis and with impairment connected to the diagnosis that it is an impairment. It prevents them from carrying out their tasks, from doing their job, from relating to the people around them in a good way. And it isn't something that they can just make yourself together. Is when I translate literally to English, is something we say in Norway. You must really pay attention, do some efforts to change this. And I know because I've done so. It's like that. So Brown also speaks a little bit about why. Why is it that somebody has the ADHD diagnosed? What is it actually? It is to a big extent it's something inherent, goes with autism actually. And Brown says that if a person has an ADHD diagnosis, probably also maybe his mom or dad has it, knowing it or not, because a lot of grown-up people actually would fit the diagnosed criteria, but that wasn't the case when they were kids. And in adult life, most of us we cope with so and so way. And it is not always seen from early childhood. Brown says that high school age, early university, college, other education is maybe the hardest, yes, because then a lot of things are on your own shoulders. When you are in the first years of school, you are taken so well care of, and the demand on your self-control in the work is not that big as it is when you come to the high school, where more responsibility is on yourself, and even more, of course, when you get to the higher education levels. And that probably is the most troublesome years for a person with ADHD. So what can we do as teachers? We need to work with the strength of these kids. Morten wants me to just doing something with the microphone. Okay. Yeah. We must try to make this sound good, actually. Maybe you already have diagnosed me. I don't have a diagnosis actually, but I'm not. It's not easy to keep the hands still when I'm speaking. I'm sorry. I'll try to get better. We are going to look to proceed. I will just say something about our brain, because we have 50 chemicals controlling the process going on between our brain cells. I'll show you a picture of that a little bit later. But 50 chemicals regulating this, and two of them, it seems to be a problem in the ADHD. And medication, chemotherapy, medication actually can help. And a lot of people would tell about that, how the medicine gives them some hours a day that in which they just function perfect, and they can work and they can do other things. And those of you that have had kids at school or in the family who is on medication, and one of those for whom medication works, you will have experienced this. And not all having the diagnosis has the benefit of this type of medication. And one explanation to that could be that not all that has a typical behavior related to such a diagnosis actually has these brain problems. There can be other reasons. That's not so easy to discover, actually. So this medication that is provided, it's not like a cure. It's not something you can take like you take penicillin and other antibiotics if you have that kind of disease, and you get well. This medication for ADHD gives you some hours of more easy function. So what we can do at schools is to make the school day less challenging for these kids. And maybe that's possible without putting them in special schools. It is possible without putting them in special schools. And it is possible to stay in the classroom as well if we manage to adapt and to also meet these children's needs. So some of the specifics of the diagnosis summed up here. One thing is this about emergency. And that's something that comes more and more when the child, when the adolescent, the adult person has time limits. That can be to do the task, to do the homework, to do assignments, and so on. And for some of the people with ADHD diagnosed, it's impossible to get things done until it gets an emergency. And maybe you also have experienced these kids that, well, they are not easy. It's not easy for them to pay attention, to be aware in the classroom situation in which a lot of things goes on that they are supposed to pay attention to. But when you speak to the parents about this, that this child has problems with paying attention, the parents will say, okay. But what we see is that when the child is occupied with playing football or playing a game on internet, the focus is perfect and they can be in such activities for hours. And that's how it is. When the interest is strong, that's a kind of medication for ADHD. But you don't, there's no way to kind of create this interest that's necessary. So in all those situations in which it is difficult for them to pay attention, it's nothing to blame them. It is because their brains works like they do. So we have been working on, let me see, I just need to organize my screen a little bit. The diagnosed criteria, behavior characteristics. And so far, the diagnosing is related to behavior descriptions from the person, him or herself, from the parents, from the teachers and other professionals who work with them. But through the last decades, there is also found, as we already have been mentioning, cognitive characteristics. It is about the brain and how the brain works. So let's have a look at that as well. Our brain has different areas. And you know, there are two kind of directions when professionals speaks about the brain. And in Europe, it is quite popular to look at, to create theories out of the brain imaging methods, and to speak about the math and the this and the that and the different places they are located, because we can see on pictures and in yeah, we can get the pictures in books or in articles to see them, but those who work with it, of course, they relate to this in another way. But the point is, this is one very surface explained area of brain research, while there are others, and maybe there is recently or at this time, these years, more of that research in US. Different methods within medicine, within psychology, neurology, to see how the brain works and to see relations. And what I'm going to speak about now is related to this and these approaches to understanding of the brain. So what there is great agreement on, and I don't think anybody, even if they use other methods to study the brain, will say something else. We have, so let's start with, we pay attention to something. We see it, we hear it, we can use other senses. And our attention, which is in the top of the brainstem, in the middle of our head, kind of, the reticular activation system starts working. And it is activation is a very, very important part of the attention processes. They activate our brain so that our senses can be ready and take in what is relevant in the situation, and elaborate it in the receiving areas of our brain, which we know are different places, the reception areas of the different senses. But very quickly, the activation goes on, and a bigger part of our brain is activated. And what we have recently had just now focused on, paid attention to, it gets connected to what we have in our brain of previous experiences. And the activation, the attention, helps to activate this part of the brain that the arrow shows now. And that happens in two different categories of processes. It happens in simultaneous processes, kind of the activation is just in a moment, in simultaneous, which means immediately or at the same time. And the other types of processes are the successive, where step by step, kind of, one after the other, sequential could be used instead of successive. Just think, what we perceive, what we take in through our senses in the run of a day, we can see the whole picture. Where I sit now, I can look around in the room and I can see all the different things, how they go together, and how they are placed related to each other. On the other hand, if I looked out on the street, I could see also something happening, cars coming along the street, for example, one after the other in a succession. And when we perceive things that comes to us in a row, in a sequence, then the successive processing of our brain is active. And if we think, and we are going to speak more about that later today, and those of you who have plans of coming tomorrow too, we will speak a lot of that also when it comes to the mathematics. Because in mathematics, there are a lot of things that come successive. Think of the algorithms when you are adding multi-digit numbers, for example, when you do it with your brain, maybe with a paper and pencil as well, not by the computer. And what is successive is also our language. The words come one by one in an endless row, successive, sequential. And not only word by word, but also speech sound by speech sound in our spoken language. It's successive. So all things that we take in and elaborate in our brain that arrives through language puts demand on successive processing. While those things that we can see in a moment, or when suddenly we understand something, that has to do with simultaneous processing. And then to get something done, we also need to activate this part of our brain. Planning could be a word for that. Executive functioning is something we speak about. That's the same. It happens here, and here is all deliberate action, thinking, awareness is going on here. And this is also the part of the brain that has problems when you have an ADHD diagnosis. Your sensation is perfect or not so perfect, but that has nothing to do with ADHD. And your way of processing what you have perceived through your senses, that can be perfect when you have an ADHD diagnosis, or it can be not so perfect. Has got nothing to do with that. But planning is a problem when you have an ADHD diagnosis. And we're going to look a little bit more about that in a little while. Here it is. To organize and to kind of organize our knowledge about the brain in such a way, because there are similarities and differences that makes it very relevant to do this analysis. And we can give the reference to Alexander Luria, the Russian neuropsychologist, who has really been useful and important in our knowledge about the brain. And earlier, it's especially focused in linguistic psychology. But recently, the last 2, 3, 4 decades, also central in cognitive psychology. And why? Because other people studying the brain by other methods in other disciplines find the same and speak in the same ways as Luria did. The poster that I show you now, it's made by Jack Naglieri, an American professor, Professor Emeritus. He's retired as a professor, but he's still active in working with telling us about the brain, among other things. And he has made this poster, and he also was one of the developers of the PASS processes, the planning, attention, simultaneous, successive theory, that actually is what I just have referred. Jack Naglieri and G.P. Das and John Kirby are the three who developed this PASS theory. And this poster has Czech translation, and I have no idea about how good it is. That will be for you to judge, actually. But you can see some easy ways of recognizing the different processes and relating them to everyday life. There are research, and the picture that's on the screen now, it maybe can look a little bit cryptic, but this is how different tests that test different cognitive processes, cognitive categories, actually. And you probably, the Wechsler scales probably are used also in Czech Republic, and they use terms like verbal comprehension, visual, spatial, fluid reasoning, working memory, processing speed, in which all of them are concepts about categories that has been created or detected and put into words because of psychometric research. And also the same with the Woodcock-Johnson, and this is another test named of Kaufman ABC, and then the CAS is the PASS theory. And this is why I use you this, show you this, actually, because here with a large sample, it's very clear that planning is a problem with this group. There is a study, Tadei, a professor at the university, now retired actually, but professor at the University of Florence in Italy, and some colleagues, they looked at typical cognitive profiles of children and adolescents with ADHD and with specific learning disabilities, like a specific reading disability or specific math disability, and most often it's reading they speak about in such studies like this. And the yellow line here, it shows the processes when reading is the problem. And as you can see, the planning is, it's not 100 here is the average. So most of this is a little bit below average or in the average area, actually. So planning is that when there's specific learning difficulty, and also simultaneous and attention, but successive is the problem. And this doesn't mean that if you have low successive, you have a reading or you have a specific learning difficulty. And it doesn't mean either that if you have a specific learning difficulty, you are low in successive. But as a group, when a big group is studied, the average of the group will be lower in successive in a lot of studies, not only this study. And we are not speaking about specific learning difficulties now, we are speaking about ADHD. So let's look at the red lines. And here you can see that planning is low and attention is low. So the result is not so clear with planning in this study as it was in Maglieri's, but both of them are low in planning, and here the simultaneous and successive is quite okay. Today says that these results allow to underline the usefulness of understanding cognitive functioning. And to know about the cognitive functioning when the children have a behavior that makes us thinking about ADHD. And to really look for what can we do to support the planning process, what can we do to get around the planning process. Tadej and his colleagues also maybe this should be a part of the diagnostic criteria for ADHD. It hasn't become so far. Maybe it will, because this is also something that is pointed to by those who are world known, because they've been working with the ADHD, like Brown, for example. Another study from the Netherlands showing also, as you can see, a low score for planning and attention. This Christopher, he has behavior problems. He is impulsive and disorganized. He forgets a lot. He cannot complete a task. He has low achievement, low marks. And clinical observation, like anxiety for assessment, when it is relevant to use strategies, he is not very elaborative and not very flexible in his use of strategies. And he doesn't not work very well. And that might also be the reason for his problems with self-esteem and also self-control, and he can easily be frustrated and behave according to that. And the CBCL, maybe you know that, a behavior assessment system, and some, yeah, it shows the result there as well, shows problems, and he meets the DSM criteria for ADHD, the combined type, which means both attention problems and hyperactivity problems. This is how it looks when you go to to see the planning processes and related to the other planning, and also attention is quite low, but planning is the lowest here. As you can see, there's also reading problems and mathematic problems, and especially in tasks that requires that you are deliberate about what you do. You need to do it yourself, so to say. It's not just repeating what somebody else has done. That's difficult for Christopher. And again, another study